Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to the Introduction to Clean Heat Rules webinar. My name is Dr. Zach Brazola, the Building Decarbonization Section Head here at the Maryland Department of the Environment's Climate Change Program. Thank you for joining us today for the Introduction to Clean Heat Rules webinar. This afternoon, we'll be talking through the Clean Heat Standard and the Zero Emissions Heating Equipment Standard, otherwise known collectively as the Clean Heat Rules. Today's presenters include Mark Stewart, Climate Change Program Manager with the Maryland Department of the Environment, and Becky Price, Clean Buildings Hub Manager with the Maryland Energy Administration. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Clean Heat Rules YouTube playlist. There will be a portion for live Q&A at the end, but please bear with us as we go through our presentations first. To submit your questions to the Q&A, you'll need to click on the Activities button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. It shows a circle, triangle, and square. From there, you can access the Q&A feature. Put your questions into that Q&A, and we'll get to as many as we can as we get to the end. And if we don't answer your questions this time around, we'll be collecting all those and working on a frequently asked questions document. So put those questions in, and we look forward to what you ask us all about today. So with that, I'm gonna kick us off. Mark, why don't you take it away?
Great, thank you, Zach. So good afternoon, everyone. As Zach mentioned, I'm Mark Stewart, Climate Change Program Manager at the Maryland Department of the Environment. And thank you for joining us for this overview of clean heat rules, which include the Clean Heat Standard and Zero Emission Heating Equipment Standard. So the issue that we want to address with these clean heat rules is that burning fuel in buildings produces air pollution that's harmful to human health and contributes to climate change. It also costs a lot of money. Fuel burning equipment in buildings produce over 3 times more nitrogen oxide or NOx emissions than power plants. As you can see in the graph, residential, commercial, and institutional buildings produce significantly more NOx emissions than electric power plants and industrial facilities in Maryland. And NOx and other forms of air pollution from fuel burning equipment harms children and adults in many ways, including shortness of breath, asthma, lung cancer, premature death, so on and so forth. Maryland is required to reduce criteria pollutants to meet increasingly stringent air quality standards and to protect the public's health. Switching to climate change as the focus, we see that fuel burning equipment in buildings is responsible for around 16% of Maryland's greenhouse gas emissions. Reducing fuel use in buildings is a critical part of Maryland's plan to achieve its greenhouse gas emission reduction requirements. The state is required to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 60% from 2006 levels by 2031 and achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. Unfortunately, we also see that current policies have not so far reduced total fuel use in Maryland's building sector. This graph shows fuel use in residential and commercial buildings going back to 2006. And when we weather normalize that data, we see that fuel use has remained relatively flat during that period, where gains in efficiency have really just been offset by a growth in the building sector itself. And this is why several organizations have called for a stack of complementary policies to help accelerate the adoption of zero-emission technologies and reduce building sector emissions. These policies include clean heat standards and equipment emission standards, among other policies that the state has either already adopted or is also pursuing. These are also the reasons why Governor Moore has directed the Maryland Department of the Environment to propose zero-emission heating equipment standards and clean heat standards. Specifically, he requires us to propose a zero-emission heating equipment standard regulation that will phase in zero-emission standards for heating equipment to reduce carbon pollution and improve air quality inside homes and the ambient air, and propose a clean heat standard regulation to expand Maryland's renewable portfolio standard to the thermal energy system, mobilizing investment and clean heat solutions for homes and businesses. The Zero-Emission Heating Equipment Standard and Clean Heat Standard address critical policy gaps. When we look broadly at building sector emissions, of course, many of those emissions are associated with the electricity that our buildings use. The state already has clean power policies that aim at reducing emissions from electricity generation, but those policies do nothing to reduce the direct emissions from buildings. We have an Empower Maryland program that reduces both direct and indirect emissions from buildings, but not fast enough to meet the state's climate change goals. We have a policy called Building Energy Performance Standards, or BEPS, but it applies only to large buildings that are responsible for around 10% of residential and commercial building emissions in the state. No existing policy focuses on small fuel burning equipment, as ZEHES will do, and no existing policy requires emissions to reduce fast enough to achieve the state's climate goals, as the Clean Heat Standard will do. Clean Heat Standard also provides additional incentives to help people achieve BEPS and ZEHES. So I want to first take a few minutes to walk through the overview of the Zero-Emission Heating Equipment Standards, which seeks to establish NOx and GHG limits for space heating and water heating equipment. I also want to note that MDE is very happy to have the support of the NESCAUM, that's the Northeast States for Coordinated Air Use Management, and RAP, or the Regulatory Assistance Project, that helped us design these policies. So similar to emission standards for cars and trucks, ZEHES sets emission standards for furnaces, boilers, and water heaters. Zero-emission equipment like electric water heaters and heat pumps are already the best-selling heating systems in Maryland. I know I've had a heat pump here in my house in Silver Spring for the last 10 years, and it's been doing a great job of keeping my family hot and cold when we want it. Heat pumps are also the best-selling heating systems in states that are colder than Maryland, like Maine, which is an important factoid that we want to throw in here to dispel the myth that heat pumps don't work well in Maryland because of our cold climate. Canadians laugh every time an American says that heat pumps don't work here. The benefits of heat pumps are many. It's one device for heating and cooling. A heat pump serves as both an air conditioner and a heating system, which can eliminate the cost of buying and maintaining separate systems. It's more efficient than an air conditioner. Heat pumps reduce cooling costs by around 18%. It's also more efficient than other heating systems. Savings can be greater than $1,000 a year on the heating side. It reduces gas risk explosion. Sadly, Marylanders have died in recent years from explosions caused by gas leaks inside of buildings. Electric heating equipment can eliminate the need for gas service. Excuse me. It improves air quality. Zero emissions from direct combustion inside and outside the building is one of the key features of efficient electric equipment. It improves occupant comfort. Heat pumps provide excellent temperature and humidity control, and they're heavily subsidized by the federal government. The federal government is providing a 30% tax credit on heat pumps, rebates for limited income households, and millions of dollars for heat pump manufacturing. Investments that have all been made and will likely continue regardless of changes in the federal administration. Heat pumps provide the lowest heating and cooling costs, and can have the lowest installation costs. Based on an analysis from NESCAUM's consultants at Energy Solutions, they find that Marylanders who use a heat pump for space heating and cooling save around $1,100 annually on average. Now that looks different depending on the heating system that you're switching from. Gas customers, people using gas furnaces, would save close to $400 a year when switching to a heat pump. The significant savings come from people who switch from oil, propane, and electric resistance heaters, where we see the annual energy cost savings increasing to $1,300 to $1,400 a year. With incentives, it can be less expensive to install a heat pump than other heating and cooling systems. Heat pump water heaters cost less to install and operate than other water heating systems. Marylanders who use a heat pump water heater save on average $314 a year compared with using other storage water heaters. With incentives, it can be less expensive to install a heat pump water heater than other water heaters. When we look at some of those incentives, we see robust federal, state, and Empower incentives that reduce the upfront cost of replacing fuel burning equipment with heat pumps. The federal incentives include a 30% tax credit, which provides up to $2,000 for all customers to install efficient electric equipment, up to $14,000 in electrification rebates for low and moderate income households, which will be distributed through a program that the Maryland Energy Administration will begin running next year. At the state level, we provide 100% of the cost to install these systems in low-income households, up to the total budgeted amount in a given year. And we offer 0% financing for up to 24 months through the Maryland Clean Energy Center and other lenders to help people finance clean energy solutions. We also see that the utilities are preparing to roll out some really robust incentives for Marylanders who are covered by the electric utility and power programs, including, I think from all of Maryland's electric utilities, a proposal that would start next year providing $3,500 toward the purchase of a heat pump water heater. And that's just an example of the type of electrification incentives that the utilities have proposed that are in front of the Public Service Commission currently. The zero-emission heating equipment standard will significantly improve public health in Maryland. We see total health savings amounting to nearly $2 billion by 2045, more than 100 premature deaths avoided, more than 200 ER visits avoided, more than 26,000 work loss days avoided, nearly 700 asthma cases avoided, and more than 4,000 lung cancer cases avoided. These are among the reasons why we already have 3 states, including Texas, Utah, and California, that have already adopted low NOx standards for water heaters, and at least 10 states that are considering zero-emission heating equipment standards. As I mentioned earlier, we worked with the Northeast States for Coordinated Air Use Management, or NESCAUM, on the development of a model rule. And they had the Mid-Atlantic and Northeastern states squarely in mind as NESCAUM led a process working with state air agencies, technical consultants, and the major heating equipment manufacturers to develop a model rule that could be adopted by all of the states in our region, and in fact, possibly beyond this region as well. So when we look at the model rule requirements, I guess the easiest way to talk through this is to say that the model rule would set, and when the state adopts it, would set a zero emission standard for furnaces, boilers, and water heaters that run on oil or propane that would begin in 2029. There's no low NOx requirement for furnaces, boilers, and water heaters that run on oil and propane because the industry isn't quite ready to roll out that type of equipment. Where we do see low NOx standards introduced is specifically and only for gas water heaters. So in the small equipment category, in the small gas water heater category, we would have a step that would possibly phase in 2027, where newly manufactured and installed small gas-fired water heaters would have to achieve ultra-low NOx standards. Excuse me. And the reason that we're able to move toward that ultra-low NOx step is because this type of equipment is already readily available. The manufacturers are producing it for the states that I mentioned previously, and could shift some of that supply to Maryland. But also for those smaller types of small gas burning water heaters, we would introduce that zero emissions limit in 2029. The regulation also includes for large water heaters, these are quite larger than your typical small water heater that you'd find in the house. An ultra low NOx step, but we're not at this point proposing a 0 NOx or GHG limit on those larger water heaters because the industry isn't quite ready to scale up the production of those water heaters. The model rule also allows for temporary installation of non-compliant equipment. It contains a provision allowing the temporary installation of non-compliant equipment to provide the sufficient time that's needed to complete necessary building modifications for the installation of compliant equipment. Non-compliant equipment can be installed for up to 6 months to allow additional time for permitting, electrical grades, etc. In other words, if someone's heat goes out and it's the winter time, a contractor could come and restore your heat, same day, even if that means taking out a busted furnace and putting in a new one. But within 6 months, they would need to return to finish the electrification upgrade to provide the zero emissions equipment. So as a quick overview here, as I wrap up this section, when would the ZEHES requirements take effect? If MDE were able to adopt a regulation by the end of 2025, then in 2027, we would have, for new gas-fired water heaters sold for installation in Maryland, they would need to meet the ultra-low NOx standard starting that year. In 2029, for new small furnaces, boilers, and water heaters sold for installation in Maryland, that equipment would need to meet the zero-emission standard starting that year. And where does all this lead? That means we would be putting standards in effect around the end of this decade, later this decade. And the transition period then really occurs through the 20s and 30s, right? Over the next 20, 25 years, we see that most heating equipment would be gradually replaced with zero emission or ultra low NOx heating equipment throughout the next 2 decades. But people can also decide to keep their existing equipment running through or even beyond that period. There's nothing about this rule that would require the replacement of functional equipment. All equipment could continue to be maintained. There's also types of equipment like direct heaters and fireplaces, other things that are not covered by this. So there's a wide range of options still for consumers. Here's a snapshot of our rulemaking process. We are at the point now of trying to get stakeholder input on the NESCAUM model rule, and then to utilize that input to develop a Maryland-specific rule that we would propose next year and hopefully adopt by the end of 2025. So with that, we'll give you a quick overview of the clean heat standard. And then, as Zach mentioned at the beginning of this call, we'll have time for some questions and answers as we go here. So the clean heat standard requires building sector emissions to reduce at the pace required to meet Maryland's clean air and climate change goals and helping people save money. So what is the clean heat standard? It requires heating fuel providers to deliver an increasing percentage of clean heat services, encouraging them to transition to become clean heat providers. In some ways, it's similar to what's called a renewable portfolio standard that obligates electricity providers to provide the electricity that is delivered to all of us here in Maryland from increasing percentages of renewable power sources. In a similar way, this is a state-specific rule that would place an obligation on the fossil heating fuel providers to deliver increasing percentages of clean heat services, which could include building insulation, heat pumps, low emission fuels, and other measures that reduce building sector emissions. So who's obligated under this? The pipeline gas utility companies and heating fuel distributors, including those that distribute fuel oil and propane. Those entities would have the opportunity to earn clean heat credits for the delivery of clean heat services to Marylanders. They would need to retire enough credits to meet annual obligations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And they could also outsource their obligation if they wanted to. Third parties like HVAC contractors and housing providers have no obligation under this, but they could earn clean heat credits and sell them to obligated parties. And building owners and residents are not obligated, but they could benefit from receiving clean heat services from the clean heat standard. Excuse me. The actions that earn clean heat credits include weatherization projects like adding insulation or air sealing, installing zero-emission heating equipment, or switching from fossil fuel to alternative fuels like biofuels or hydrogen. Equity is a really core component of a clean heat standard. There's a requirement that ensures that low and moderate income households benefit from clean heat services, and that supports weatherization and heat pump installations that help reduce household energy costs, especially for homes that are households that are experiencing energy burden in our state. So when would this begin? If we're able to adopt a regulation, a phase 1 regulation in 2025, then obligated parties would begin reporting data to MDE in 2026. In 2026, the obligated parties would also have the opportunity to begin earning early action credits. The program would really, at the earliest, get started in 2027. That's when obligated parties would begin registering, either directly or through a contractor, enough clean heat credits to meet their annual obligation. And that's also when consumers would likely begin receiving additional information about, or maybe even incentives for, clean heat services. We see that a clean heat standard has many benefits. It sets a clear, predictable, long-range schedule for Maryland to transition from fossil heat to clean heat. Obligated parties are motivated to promote the lowest cost options for deploying clean heat measures, such as promoting existing incentives. It supports other policies and provides incentives to help building owners pay for ZEHES and BEPS. It assures benefits to low and moderate income families, allows diverse clean heat resources and customer choice, and supports heat pumps with credits and promotes replacement before failure. These are among the reasons why we see at least 10 states, including a cluster of states in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, are developing or considering developing a clean heat standard for themselves. MDE intends to adopt a clean heat standard reporting rule in 2025 and adopt credit holding requirements in 2026. We're at the point now in collecting stakeholder input on the basic idea of a clean heat standard and the basic architecture of a program, as well as in a couple of weeks, starting to get some input on some of the reporting requirements that would be proposed next year. The goal is by the end of 2026, so more than a year out from now, to complete the rulemaking and adopt a full, two-part regulation for a clean heat, to establish a clean heat standard. I want to address a few frequently asked questions because we've been getting public input on building decarbonization and other decarbonization policies for several years now, and a few things keep on coming up. Will using a heat pump increase my energy costs? Good question. Excuse me. Let me drink some water here. Sorry, I'm battling a cold. So this graph shows heating costs from a few different types of typical heating equipment, right? Electric resistance heating, two different types of gas furnaces. The 80% efficient gas furnace is kind of your standard efficiency, and then you've got a 95% kind of high efficiency gas furnace shown here. And what we've also included is the performance of a cold climate heat pump. Now, a cold climate heat pump, and really just about every heat pump that's available, will provide the lowest heating costs when it is, warmer outside. We see that the average heating season outdoor temperature in Maryland is around 40 degrees. So if you can see on this graph where you see 40 degrees, you see that a heat pump is providing the lowest heating costs at the average heating season temperature and every temperature above that point. We also see that with the cold climate heat pump, it's able to provide the lowest cost heating even at the lowest temperatures that we typically see in Maryland. Now there is, a chance where you get some, wicked cold night or really bad cold snap. And that's where the cost of running a cold climate heat pump is comparable to the cost of running a furnace. But for all of the other warmer hours of the year, which is the majority, we see that the heating equipment, the heating cost from a heat pump is significantly lower than the heating cost of other equipment. Another question that we get, should we rely on electricity alone to heat our homes? Good question, but we already rely on electricity to power our devices, including furnaces, and we have a very reliable electric grid in Maryland. We're already dependent on a stable electricity supply. The electric grid gets even more reliable with the addition of distributed energy resources. It's becoming more reliable. More and more clean energy generators and energy storage systems come online each year. And we also note, again, that these policies have no impact on you continuing to use alternative types of backup heating systems that you already may enjoy in your home. Can the electric grid handle building electrification? The Public Service Commission studied this issue. The study found that efficient electrification of buildings and vehicles will require modest electric grid investments below historic levels. Other studies also find that electric growth from building electrification is very manageable. I want to turn it to Becky Price from the Maryland Energy Administration to go over some details about some of the resources that MEA has to help people transition to a lower cost, lower emissions future.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And I also am battling a cold, so I hope you're feeling better. And if anyone else on the phone has a cold, I'm sorry. But thanks, Mark. As Mark said, and Zach said as well, I'm over at the Maryland Energy Administration, which is Maryland State Energy Office. We have a mission to promote clean, affordable, and reliable energy and greenhouse gas emissions reductions to benefit all Marylanders in a just and equitable manner. We do this through a variety of policy and programmatic offerings, including through the distribution of grants, rebates, and financing for a variety of audiences, including businesses, households, community groups, organizations, and local governments. If you could just switch over to the next slide, that'd be great. Awesome, thanks. So you see the mission statement there, and I always say the TLDR is that we provide funding, and a lot of folks don't know that. So we're all here today because we know that Maryland via MDE is promulgating several policies that aim to encourage widespread electrification and decarbonization in the building sector, which, as we know, is crucial if we're going to meet our climate goals. And we also understand that accomplishing this at the scale that we want is going to require a lot of collective education on kind of both the pathways to achieving these outcomes, as well as how we can best leverage available funding and financing to help defray the costs of these improvements. Which is why back in 2022, our legislators actually mandated the creation of an initiative to help guide Marylanders toward the information they need to help make more informed decisions on building improvements. So, oh, and sorry, next slide. This initiative is known as the Maryland Clean Buildings Hub, and it's going to be it is housed within the Maryland Energy Administration, and it's going to pull from the expertise and resources from a host of other stakeholders, such as sister state agencies like the Department of Housing and Community Development, green banks and financiers like the Maryland Clean Energy Center, utilities, energy service providers, community groups, and more. So I think it's helpful to think of MDE as being your first stop to clarify these regulations. So ZEHES, Clean Heat Standard, and even the building performance standards. And the Clean Buildings Hub as the sort of second stop on your journey to help chart your path to the energy savings and environmental benefits of clean heat technologies. So as it relates to clean heat, one of the hub's goals is to help take the sort of administrative burden off homeowners as they look to replace fossil fuel powered appliances and systems with electric alternatives such as heat pumps. So this is kind of going to include the creation and curation of educational materials, guidance documents to help you identify how to decarbonize your homes and buildings, and information on the funding opportunities to help pay for these improvements, such as the Empower incentives that we know are being retooled basically as we speak, to kind of encompass decarbonization and electrification. As we know previously, they were more so focused on energy savings, as well as the forthcoming IRA efficiency and electrification rebates, collectively known as the HOMES rebates, that will be available to households in 2025. We'll also be doing things like curating vendor lists to help you identify, contractors that can help, do this work for you. And additionally, the Clean Buildings Hub is really going to be that arm within the state that conducts heavy outreach through events, webinars, information sessions, to help homeowners navigate this transition. Next slide. Awesome, thanks. So I've been talking about this Clean Buildings Hub within MEA, and it may sound somewhat nebulous right now, and that's because we're currently working on building it to be the best resource for Marylanders that we can. We've done a ton of stakeholder engagement over the last year to understand, the types of information that folks seek and resources they need. So in the meantime, we have a few ways to get information out to you. Kind of the most immediate is by signing up for a newsletter, which if one of my MDE colleagues, yes, could drop it in the chat. You'll get information like MEA grant programs, the updates on the IRA rebates, updates on Empower, updates on what's going on at the federal level. We also have some pages on MEA's current website, which also if we could get a link there, awesome. And we're simultaneously working on building our own kind of independent website that's going to house all of this information, be sort of that first stop as you're navigating this. So the kind of immediate ask is to sign up for that newsletter, and we'll let you know when that bigger, more integrated website is ready. And you'll see sort of on this slide the ideas of the types of resources we want to provide to you. So how-to guides, primers, the crown jewel, as I like to say, will be a funding and financing matrix, and making it crystal clear what you are eligible for and what's available here and now, case studies, etc. So I think that's it for me today, pretty short and sweet, but I hope to connect with you all in the years to come.
Awesome. Thank you, Becky. And another real quick wrap-up piece as we preview our schedule for stakeholder input before turning to Q&A today. So today is an introduction to the clean heat rules, really open to everyone. Soon, I think actually later this week, we're going to have a session with environmental justice communities to begin getting more input. This is actually, I think, our third meeting with environmental justice community members about the clean heat rules. Introduction to clean heat rules, a discussion for HVAC contractors coming next week. And then I think later, maybe the next week, is clean heat standard reporting requirements for obligated parties. So those are just some of the sessions that we have, and you all have the opportunity to sign up for those as well. December, we'll of course be doing more stakeholder meetings, and there's of course much more stakeholder engagement planned for 2025. You can contact us and check out our new Clean Heat website by picking up your cell phone and pointing the camera at one of those QR codes. And if that's too sophisticated or confusing, then feel free to just email or call us. Our email address is cleanheat.umd@maryland.gov, and we'll be happy to assist you. Because I have a cold and, the wisdom to hire Dr. Zach Brazola, I'm going to turn some of the Q&A over to Zach, who can answer some of the questions that you all have put in the chat. We've received some really great questions, so I appreciate that.
Thanks, Mark. And thank you all for joining us today. And just to reiterate on this page, you can email us at cleanheat.md@maryland.gov or click on one of the links, scan those QR codes to see the website and join our email list. We've also dropped those links in the chat. So lots of different ways to get at it and hopefully to help you answer the questions that you might still have after today. So we've definitely gotten a lot of great questions, and keep them coming. As a reminder, if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the Q&A, that circle, triangle, square button at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you click on Q&A, you can enter it, and we're going to start sifting through these all and do our best to answer as many as we can. So I'll take an easy one first. We got a question about if the slides could be emailed to somebody. And the good news is you don't even have to email us to ask about this. We're going to post this whole session on YouTube, and those slides, the slides you just saw today, are going to be the description on that recording. So you'll actually be able to get a PDF of the slides right off of the YouTube page. And so those will be coming in a little while once we get as we get the recording and post it to YouTube. So check back or in a couple of days on the YouTube page. We do have already an empty Clean Heat playlist for all you folks to see and follow, and you'll get updates when we upload it. So we got a question now. We're really going to get into the weeds here. Well, let's see. Okay, yeah. So someone asked a great question here. Does the zero emissions heating equipment standard require removing working heating systems? And Mark mentioned this briefly, but I'm going to just reiterate it here now. The zero emissions heating equipment standard only applies to new heating systems within those size limits that we put up on that table on the screen. And those all come from the model rule that NESCAUM developed. And so this is only for new heating equipment within those size categories. And so that will be, again, as the slides go up, feel free to go and take a look at those to give you a sense of what we're talking about here. But that is what we're talking about. Yeah, another great question that we get a lot here too. Does it apply to gas stoves or fireplaces? No, cooking equipment is not covered by ZEHES, so this does not apply to gas stoves. And the same thing for fireplaces, those and other, what we call direct heaters. They're small, a little thing, like you might have a cabin off in the woods somewhere with a little propane burner just to heat that little room. Those direct heaters are not covered by this, by ZEHES either. So let's see what's up next. One question has asked us, how do we see Maryland's rules being different from NESCAUM's model rule? Well, that's a great question, and that's the whole reason we're talking to you today. If you have feedback on that model rule, please provide that in our feedback form. We're going to take all that information into account as we go forward with adopting a Maryland version of that model rule. So you all get to provide some input as we do this, and that's the whole goal. We've got a model rule that is intended to provide a lot of clarity and kind of the similar requirements across a large area so that there's certainty for manufacturers and for installers. And we generally will want to keep within the broad parameters of that model rule so that what you install in Maryland would be the same, fall under a similar requirement is in other states that are considering this. And so that's our general heading. But if you've got some feedback about what specifically we might want to consider here in Maryland, we want to hear from you. So please provide that feedback, and we will be reviewing that all as we move forward. And that's the whole goal with these stakeholder sessions. So more questions really detailed on the ZEHES rule. What does 2029 mean in terms of those zero emission standards? Is that a hard stop on January 1st, 2029 or December 31st, 2029? Well, This is really technical, and so for the person that asked that, I encourage you to go into the model rule and read it if you're really curious. It is technically defined in the regulation as manufactured for install in Maryland after January 1st, 2029. So it is January 1st, but it's not a hard stop, because you might manufacture a piece of equipment on December 31st of 2028, and you could still install that in Maryland in March of 2029 as the kind of stock rolls out. But if that piece of equipment is manufactured after January 1st, 2029, it cannot be installed in Maryland. And that really gets to the point of what the ZEHES rule is all about. It's about what the equipment's being manufactured. It really is intended to adjust the trajectory of what is being manufactured for installation in Maryland. And so that's where that comes from. But if you want to dig in anymore, I encourage you to go look at the model rule and provide any feedback if you have thoughts there. Let's see, what else did we get? Someone asked us specifically about that feedback form, by when. So we encourage you to provide it by the end of this year. We are actively taking information as Mark presented. We're looking to start to propose this in the new year. And so if you provide feedback in the next month and a half, that's really when we're going to get the best time for everyone to be weighing in. As you saw, we're holding a bunch of stakeholder sessions right now to hear from everyone. So please submit that feedback by the end of this year. Let's see, what else? Oh, this goes back. Yeah, this is something that we kind of answered previously. Will Maryland's approach align with the approach taken by other states? That is the purpose of the model rule. So we are intending to align with what the other states that help develop this model rule are thinking about. And this is all trying to move in the same direction. Again, we want to hear from you. Is there something that we need to consider for Maryland specifically? We'll take that into account and weigh it as we look about trying to keep market, certainty and alignment across all the states that might do this. But the goal is generally uniformity across the states as best as possible. Yeah, and somebody asked as well about purchasing that kind of manufactured for install. What about, could I go to another state and buy from a contractor there after 2029? So that is the whole idea of manufactured for install. It doesn't matter if you buy it from out of state. If it's being installed in Maryland, it would not be allowed if it's manufactured after January 1st, 2029. And so that's kind of how that falls out. And as with any Air and Radiation Administration regulation, non-compliance with that would be subject to non-compliance to compliance action by the department's Air Quality Compliance Division. And so that's going to be handled as non-compliance with an MDE and Air and Radiation Administration regulation. And so what exactly are the consequences? All of that gets handled on that case-by-case basis, but basically, from people based on the details of the situation. And so that's how that all kind of is looked after down the line. But to that person's question, really no. If you're not allowed to get something from another state and install it in Maryland after that date. So let me take a sip of water here. This has been a rapid fire set of questions. Keep them coming. We really appreciate it. We got a question about the flexibility among fuel providers to transfer their obligations to other companies. This is really in the weeds, so I'm going to encourage the person that asked this to come to our obligated parties session in a week or two. Coming soon, you can sign up by the same form you signed up for this webinar, and the details on this are even going to come a little bit later, because that what we call the credit holding requirements don't come into effect until this kind of second phase of the rule that we're not working on right now. We're working on the reporting side, but kind of at a high level and in short, just the renewable portfolio standard is a good model. Those obligations are placed, but where you get it from can vary, and you can trade them, you can sell them, all sorts of things can happen with the actual credits. And the same idea here applies. So that fossil fuel provider, we would love them to become a clean heat provider and be providing clean heat options to Maryland households and businesses, and as a result, meeting their obligations. But they could also decide that they'd rather just find another way to meet that, which could be working with a contractor or another company that does these installations already and having them provide the credits to that fossil fuel provider. So it's a really flexible performance-based standard that lets each fossil heating fuel provider meet the standard however they see fit, what is going to work best for them in their long-term planning, because the whole point of clean heat, the clean heat standard and the clean heat rules in general, is to provide a long-term managed transition towards our emissions reduction goals. And so this is all about setting out long trajectories to meet our statutory goals. And it allows a lot of flexibility within that for how you're going to get there. And all these two different regulations really work together to help make that possible. So I hope that mostly answers your question, but again, and a plug for anyone here that's really interested in this, come to the obligated parties session in a few weeks. We got a question about the kind of approval process for regulation. So MDE take stakeholder feedback. We're doing this stakeholder feedback right now. We're going to put forward a proposal and take public comment. And during that period, that's later on, but that's when we take official public comment. We review it all. The certain committees within the state also has the ability to review all regulations that state agencies put forward. So all of that kind of comes at a later date. We're kind of in the early stages right now, just getting feedback before we even put out a formal proposal. So we've got some time towards then, and the whole goal is to hear from you all now so that we can be more agile and make adjustments as necessary. Let's see what other questions we got. Let's see. Lots of good questions here. Let's find another one to answer. Yeah, and folks, I'll put a disclaimer in. We're coming up to the end of the hour and we're going to wrap up here soon. So if you haven't gotten your question in, feel free to drop them in. Again, we're not going to get to them all. We've gotten so many good questions today, but we'll do our best to work on a lot of these in an FAQ and in further follow-up sessions. So somebody asked, what do I have to do if I'm an HVAC contractor, a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, for those not familiar with the acronym contractor? Well, the good news here is a lot of this is going to come down from the manufacturers. They're going to start really selling and having available for install in Maryland the type of compliant equipment that is allowed for sale in the state. And so your distributors, your suppliers, they're going to be the ones that this is what they stock. And so you're going to just be basically, this is what I have to install, and just making sure you're installing the compliant equipment. And the good news, again, heat pumps are the best-selling technology in Maryland, heating technology in Maryland right now. And so HVAC contractors, most of you are probably already familiar with what this equipment looks like, how you install it. Maybe you're not that familiar yet with cold climate heat pumps or variable speed heat pumps. That's something that's kind of, again, newer the last 10, 15 years that we've really had these vast ranges of temperatures where you can really meet them with an air source heat pump. But if you're an HVAC contractor, now's the time. Start learning from the different manufacturers what they offer in this space. There's a lot of different products available in a lot of different size categories. What do they offer? How do you install it? What are the best practices for sizing a heat pump in Maryland and for kind of cold climate heating? There's a ton of resources out there already from the manufacturers. Part of the Clean Building Sub is really going to be all about standing that up to help people learn as well. Yeah, that's a very good one. So let's see, what other questions do we have? Yeah, so we got a good question actually about new and emerging technologies that, for example, actually like a residential natural gas heat pump or things like a biofuels. So the whole point of the Clean Heat program is that these are going to be evaluated on the Clean Heat Standard side. They're really going to be taking into account net life cycle emissions, and so we're going to be doing accounting for these. So you can actually make the math talk. And so if a biofuel, for example, reduces emissions 80% over a current standard fuel that you might use, you're going to generate the clean heat credits that account for that. And so again, this is coming later in the in the phases. This is not what we're currently talking about. We're really just talking about reporting rules on the clean heat standard side. But there are options to kind of account for some of these as we go. All righty. What else? And looking at the time, we probably have time for maybe 1-2 more questions. I know it's getting to the end of the day for some folks, so I don't want to keep you right to the very last minute. Let's see. Scrolling through, lots of good questions. Let's see. Someone asked, is Maryland the only state advancing the zero emission standards? No, there are several states, and Mark put this slide up. There's a bunch of different states all up and down the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, plus some out on the West Coast that are looking at zero emission standards. So the whole idea here is a whole bunch of states are looking at this rule and considering them. And that's what really sends the signal to the manufacturers that this is going to be the future of what can be sold in those states. So that's a really key piece of this. Let's see. Let's see, looking through so many good questions. Hard to answer them all in one time. Yeah, someone really asked about the, let's see. Yeah, so somebody asked about hybrid heating systems, and this is basically where you might have some fossil fuel heating and a heat pump, and this is a strategy that under the clean heat standard is as we start putting it together. That's the kind of thing that we would value again on that life cycle emissions basis, and so that is very much on the table. And on the ZEHES zero emissions heating equipment side, that's the kind of thing. If you've got an existing gas, propane, whatever furnace, there is nothing in the regulation about removing that existing equipment. So you absolutely can put in a new heat pump and then keep that existing system to run in a dual fuel setup. So that very much is part of what we're considering here, and it really would be the an option to help you meet your ultimate goals. And let's see. Yeah, here's another good one. I'm a contractor. What's the incentive to convince customers to switch to a heat pump today rather than in 2026 when the clean heat standard comes into effect? And should I wait? That's a really good question. So part of the incentive is that right now, today, there's a lot of good federal funding to help support these. So that's a great incentive already. And as Mark showed, just in the new year, most of the electric companies across Maryland have proposed to the Public Service Commission substantial incentives for installing heat pumps, which is a great reason to install it today rather than in 2026. Furthermore, we're working on that early action credit registry. And so as we go into proposing this and getting it out, pretty early on, actually, you'll be able to register those clean heat measures, and then we'll be doing some of that crediting and evaluation later on. But it's intended to really help ensure that people keep installing these, right? You shouldn't wait. There's energy cost savings today, and the longer you wait, the worse off it is. Plus, if you put in a new piece of equipment now, that equipment's going to be in for 10, 15, 20 years. We want to ensure that they're starting to change over. So, and those homeowners or business owners are really going to feel the price impacts if they're using a piece of equipment that's costing them more to run. That's not where we want them to be. So if you're a contractor and you're hearing this, come to the contractor sessions, but we are encouraging folks to install heat pumps today and not wait. So that's kind of my take-home message for all of that. And with that, that's all the questions we have time for today. But we had more in the Q&A that we didn't get to. So if you put one in, we'll work on an FAQ document to help answer them. We'll take those and do our best to answer them as we go along here, take your feedback as well. But if you have additional questions, come to those future sessions. We're going to hold even more as we keep going down the line here. And if you have any additional questions, you can always reach out to the Clean Heat team at cleanheat.mde@maryland.gov or give us a call. And so we'll send a follow-up email after today's webinar with a meeting summary and that link to that recording. And so we want to thank you all for attending and coming today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thanks for your time.